This video is being made as a documentary to document the wonderful occasion that we had today to put on display a permanent creation of a piece of art that was created from the donation of an elderly woman from San Saba County who gave 2 T-posts sacrificially. She only had enough money for 2 T-posts. It was a caravan of 9 trucks and trailers and a big group of people that came from San Saba County, other ranchers and townspeople and friends of mine that came and brought supplies, brought hay, brought fencing supplies. While they were getting those things at a local tractor supply there in San Saba, a little elderly woman found out about what they were doing from some of the staff. And she walked up to the cashier and she says, this is all the money I have. How many T-posts will this buy? And they told her it would buy 2. And so our county judge here, Judge George Bryan in Hemphill County, asked me at the end of our effort if he could have those 2 T-posts. And I said, sure, but what are you thinking? He said, I'm gonna have a local artist here who's a gentleman named Doug Ricketts that's nationally known and has one of the most creative minds of anybody I've ever known, to create a permanent memorial to represent the donations and the sacrifice, starting with that little elderly lady and including all the people from the greatest gift to the least gift that came here to help our ranchers in our community. And so this piece of art was unveiled today, and Judge Bryant and his wife Beth, along with Mr. and Ms. Doug Ricketts, have donated it, and it'll be permanently kept in our local museum here in Canadian. And so it's going to be a reminder, not just to us, but to generations of people to come, about the generosity, the thoughtfulness, the kindness, the goodness, the love, and the care that many people across the nation have given to our people. Well, here in Canadian, Texas, and Hemphill County and the surrounding counties to us, we had what was called the Perryton Fire. The Perryton Fire started southwest of Perryton, Texas in Ockaltree County and quickly advanced eastward, paralleling the Canadian River many miles. And then eventually, when the wind shifted from the west-southwest to a northern wind, just around Higgins, Texas, made its way then, when the north wind hit, east past Higgins and then south across about 1/3 of our Hemphill County. This was on Monday, March the 6th. Early morning, my wife and I got up, and the wind was already blowing amazingly. I mean, we're used to wind in this neck of the woods, but this was the wind of winds. And I remember telling Tanya, my wife, that if we got past a fire today, it was going to be very fortunate. And little did I know, in a matter of a few hours, that hundreds of thousands of acres of country would be burning. Lives would be lost, human life. Thousands of head of cattle would be burned to death. Hundreds, if not thousands of miles of fences would be destroyed. Homes would be lost. People's lives would be indelibly marked by the events of that day. The fire started on that Monday, March the 6th, and it burned most of that day and into the night. There was still some minor fires burning the next day, on Tuesday the 7th. Our firefighters fought fire all night long, and we had many volunteer fire departments from all over the region. And then we had fire departments literally from the nation eventually get here with their fire trucks and with help. We had first responders from everywhere that came here to help. We had an amazing support system. The Texas A&M Agri-Life Forest Service brought planes that dumped big cargo amounts of water around homes to help save the homes. We had 2 men here in our community that are ranchers that had their own helicopters, and they went around and found sources of water and would pick up that water in big tote bags and take it and put it around on homesteads to keep them from burning. Growing up here in the Texas Panhandle, I've experienced fires. I've had fires involving my own ranching operation, but I never saw fire not only move as quickly, but have the heat and intensity of this particular fire. This fire melted barbed wires at the top of the fence versus most fires that melt the bottom wires. We saw places where the top of the fence post, metal fence posts, were melted. And we saw an amazing amount of heat displayed to literally devastate not only vegetation, but even metal. The wind got up and blew some power lines down, and it sparked a little spark, and before long there was a terrific fire that was uncontrollable. 500,000 acres burned up in less than a day, and it was a scourge on the earth, even though with our best efforts with many people, because of the wind and because of all the fuel, it was just crazy how fast it went. We saw neighbors rise up to help their neighbors, even though they themselves were hurting and in great need. We saw neighbors saying, "My neighbor needs it worse than I do. Go help my neighbor." We saw people in this community that weren't even related to agriculture rise up and say, "I'm bringing food to feed your volunteers." We saw people all over this area rise up to meet the challenge of the moment, to help our fellow man in such a way that it was overwhelming with emotions. I witnessed the very best in people, and I witnessed the fact that we still live in the greatest country on the planet. I witnessed the fact that people love and care for each other, even though when we watch a lot of the national news media, you'd think that we were all at war with each other by being divided. I saw people from all over the nation respond to our fires, whether that was sending donations that were financial in kind, or hay, or fencing supplies, feed. I saw people themselves. We had a lady that drove from Minnesota just to come to clean house. She said, "I can do anything." We had soldiers that flew on their own, took their own leave time, flew from Florida to Amarillo, Texas, rented a car, drove to Canadian, and spent a week serving. And those soldiers, I'm proud of the fact, stayed here in our home with us. We were honored to serve them while they were here serving us. And so we experienced our community at its finest. We experienced the American people at their finest. And it gives me a lot of hope about the future of our country, feeling and believing that we still can live our best days.
In this report tonight, we examine the lasting effect that those fires will have here on the High Plains.
Yeah, exactly.
The third year for the Texas A&M Agri-Life Cattle Conference in Hemphill County has a different feel than the previous two. It's been more than 2 months, but people can't blame the Texas wind for their watering eyes and tightening throats.
our ranchers are going through those emotions. So the emotional part of this is huge. And so one of the things we're going to talk about later this afternoon is grief.
Nearly 437,000 acres of mostly ranch land burned on March 6th. 3 fires, the Dumas Complex, Perryton, and LaFours East, claimed life, land, and livestock. In Lipscomb County, 25-year-old father-to-be Cade Cook died in the fires. 20-year-olds Cody Crockett and Sidney Wallace, along with 35-year-old Sloan Everett, died in Gray County, trying to cut fence and save their cattle, trying to beat a fire fueled by winds of 50 to 65 miles per hour. The working estimate is that more than 3,000 head of cattle died in those fires. In Hemphill County, more than 1,500 miles of fencing was destroyed, leaving little space for cattle to graze and little time for ranchers to process what happened.
Well, just one evening we had 12 sections of grassland burn off, and that was over half our ranch, and it was pretty traumatic.
The fires changed directions, at times burning open prairie, at times threatening homes or entire communities. Higgins and Glazier were saved by fire crews turning the Lipscomb fire away from the towns. Despite their efforts, 2 homes were destroyed.
Most of those ranchers are pretty much in shock from the fire. Cattle
needed to be found.
The cattle were out on the roads. The herds were mixed up. I'm sure the ranchers, and I wasn't involved in this, but they literally would grab a bale of hay and just drive around till they found some cattle and set it down.
Burns needed to be treated.
One of the most heart-wrenching things for me is a cow that is about ready to calve. Her udder's been burned. She has her calf. Her calf is up trying to nurse. The cow's bawling for that baby to nurse, and there's no way for it to happen.
Resilient and usually self-sufficient, ranchers were forced to ask for help.
It's required a lot more labor to manage the lost ones and the burned ones than I ever suspected. We've had about 12 babies that we've had to bottle feed, and we shuffle around, and to move cattle has been a lot more labor intensive than I expected it to be.
More help was on the way.
This time of year, we're not generally quite this busy. We're finishing up feed season. People's generally towards the end of the feeding season, so business kind of tapers off, but March 6th, that kind of all changed.
The local feed store Avon operates in Canadian threw open its doors, serving as a supply point.
It was an operation that just grew a lot bigger than we thought it would be, and luckily we had the equipment and the place to handle it.
Avon teamed up with Jeff Hortz.
I contacted our county agent just by a little text and said, if you need some help, give me a holler. So he did.
Hortz is a rancher who considers himself lucky. He became the de facto supply and volunteer coordinator.
It was unbelievable how soon the response hit and the magnitude. You could hardly keep up with one truck coming in before 2 more were stacked up behind it.
Hay, feed, veterinary supplies, and much-needed manpower arrived in the days following the fires.
Everything from those single little donations to the huge ones, they all came from the heart, and it was pretty moving.
Statewide, Governor Greg Abbott freed up some funding by declaring a state of emergency. The Texas Farm Bureau has made thousands of dollars of financial contributions to ranchers, and tax breaks are available as they rebuild.
And that won't help you completely recover, but it's just one more step to help the terrible tragedies that we've seen here in the fires.
It will take years for the High Plains to fully recover. In the immediate future, fences are still down and damaged.
You know, fencing supplies are always going to be a need, or in the next 6 months while these people try to recover from it. That's the biggest deal right now, is getting all the fences repaired. So.
Rain brings newly sprouted grass to the sandhills of the High Plains, but it'll take a long time until that grass is mature enough to handle grazing. The land needs time to regrow. As for ranchers, that means they have to take their livestock elsewhere, paying for the grass they should already own miles away from where they live.
That's really the next step, is giving this country time to get over this terrible tragedy. And time is money.
The young ranchers, Holloway says, have it better. They have more time to recover, more years to wait on insurance and grass and herd size. They can rebuild, and some of them will.
There's a lot of hope left in our beef producers here in our area.
And they'll be better for the formative lesson they learned in early March.
It taught me to truly feel compassion for people that have had other situations.
They'll never forget the grace they received after living through the third largest fire in High Plains history.
You just hope to God that it's not going to be your ranch, next summer. So, because that's your whole livelihood right there.
There was a huge miracle that unfolded here because of the thoughtfulness of people, and I'm still dealing with that miracle. People are still giving, people are still helping, and they're so thoughtful. The miracle started almost immediately. Of course, our fences were burned, herds were mingled together, cattle were needing to be put down because they were burned, their hooves were burned. People showed up from everywhere to bring feed and hay and things that were critical. We had a veterinarian company out of California that flew Vetricin out here, which is specifically designed for burned animals. And they sent a team of people out here to help administer it even. We saw people that came from everywhere to help the ranchers here in our area. There were many, many more people involved in the relief effort than there were victims of the fire. We had people that sent hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations. Some of those were $5 and $10 each, and some of them were large. People sent pipe for new corner posts. They sent feed for our cows to have protein and energy. They sent hay. We got hay from as far away as Tennessee and Louisiana, right here in Canadian Texas, and all over Texas and Oklahoma and even New Mexico and Colorado and Kansas. A gentleman from Nebraska sent all the hay that he had and donated the trucking. We just had things from all over, and I'm so thankful to be an American. I'm thankful to be a citizen of the great state of Texas. But most of all, I'm thankful to be a Christian because I saw God's people stand up to help someone else that needed a helping hand.
Now it's recording. This is my friend, Mr. and Ms. Randy McCrae from Sterling City, Texas, and they have brought a big load of fencing supplies over from Sterling City, and their family and friends and neighbors have all donated their church. And so, guys, would y'all like to say something to the families of Hemphill County, the ranchers?
Well, we've been there and we understand what you're going through. We had bad fires in 11 and we started making phone calls and all we got was "you bet, what do we need?" So we put together this load to try to help out a little bit. And this is Roberta.
And farming and ranching families are some of the best people we'll ever meet, and we're so happy that we're able to do this to help. We're honored to bring a load of hope to people that have to keep hoping, because in the ranching industry there are good days and bad days, and we've been through both. And we just pray that this little bit of hope will help you get through the days ahead and to help you rebuild, get your herds back. And this comes from a lot of big ranchers out west, and even the steel company in San Angelo, and friends in San Angelo. But we love you and God bless you.
private citizens that had nothing to do with the federal or state governments are the ones that stood up. And they did it because they felt like it was the right thing to do. They did it because someone had helped them in their past. You know, we're separated by many miles a lot of times, and time and distance, but really in the big scheme of things, we're all neighbors to one another. It's an attitude that we can have if we choose to, and I witness that many people choose to have that attitude.
As he wrapped up his sermon that morning, I thought to myself, somebody in this community, the county or myself or somebody, needs to do something with those 2 fence posts as a reminder to this community now and for generations to come of not just the fire and all the people that volunteered, but all the generous donors that gave and gave and gave and continue to give to this day. And all of us, including myself and my wife, who benefited from that. So the next morning, the first phone call I made was to Andy. I said, Andy, if you can find those 2 posts, would you gather them up and bring them to me? So he did. He brought them up and put them in the back of my pickup and told me that he'd found them. My next call was to Doug Ricketts. I knew immediately who I wanted to be involved in putting this together. We all know Doug, and there was no doubt in my mind that whatever he did would be the best. So I called Doug, and he came by, and I asked him, I said, Doug, would you and Kathy and be a part with Beth and myself and putting something together to give to this community to remind them not only of the fire, but of all those people who were so generous and gave of their time and their resources and their money. And he said, sure, you bet.
I do want to say a thank you to every person, far and wide, and thank each of you for the things you've given and sent to us, whether that was financial or a gift of hay or pipe or feed or some clothes or other things. But even to the people that just lifted up in prayer, our people that called to say, what can I do? People from all walks of life, but especially our agricultural community in this nation that stood tall and said, we're here, what can we do? So thank you to all from Hemphill County, Canadian Texas, from the Texas Panhandle, from the Lone Star State. Thank you to our fellow Americans and citizens for your generosity and for remembering us in our time of need. And believe you me, we have a loyal group of people here. And someday when there's a need elsewhere, our citizens will continue to stand tall and remain in their giving to pay it forward in respect for what you guys have done for us. Thank you.